Hi, people. Hope you're all well. What a time in British politics. What a time. Um, you know, the question of Liz Truss's premiership is going to be one of those ones that come up on sort of pub quizzes. Who was Britain's shortest serving prime minister? Usually they're quite obscure answers, and people have to rack their minds into history. This, of course, is now, it's contemporary. She has definitely surpassed the record of Lord Canning, who died in office after 119 days, and Viscount Godric, who resigned after 144 days back in the early 19th century. So, I mean, that's going back to the reign of, if I've got this right, George the Fourth. It's incredible. Um, 44 days and be a bit longer in totality, but it's you struggle to wonder even what's happened in her tenure apart from the big event, which was, of course, the passing of the Queen. What achievement did she have? It's really difficult to point to anything. Um, Continued support for Ukraine. She's on the right side of history with that. Um, Looking around the world, and this is not what the video is about, but I'll just say this in passing. Looking around the world, it's interesting showing which countries have abstained from votes condemning Russia. India is a glaring one. I mean, there's a lot of countries there that are totalitarian states that would be ideologically sympathetic to Russia. I don't understand India's stance. I don't know why. Um, is Modi scared of Putin? I don't know what India's playing at because the world's biggest democracy has a real chance to show leadership, and they're just sitting on the fence. And I do believe when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, if you're neutral, you support the oppressor. That's this sort of situation. That's how I see it. I don't think you can be neutral when it comes to this sort of situation where you have a powerful country led by a tyrant invading a smaller country that's fighting for its very survival. I don't know how you could be neutral on that. But anyway, I digress. Starmer, of course, has called for a general election. Well, he would. Of course, he would. He's not the only one. The leaders of the Nationalist parties called for a general election. Opposition leaders in the devolved government have called for general election. That this is, the momentum seems to be growing. Of course, the government has to agree to it, and they're highly, highly unlikely to do that. They will say we won the general election in 2019. The people voted for a conservative government. This gets into a constitutional area, and you know what's interesting? I had a lesson yesterday with one of my Chinese students, and I've been watching the proceedings. I think I mentioned this in the last video of the 1922 committee, and I thought, well, something might happen today or tomorrow, or but then 5 minutes into the lesson, she said, "Oh, I'm just looking at the news." She'd obviously been looking at it on her phone or something, and she said Truss has resigned, and I thought, "Ah, that's mistranslation. It just means she's under pressure." But yeah, indeed, I interrupted the lesson. I turned on the news, and there it was. So I spent the rest of the lesson attempting to explain, bear in mind this is to a Chinese student, um, the mechanics of British politics. And I had to start with the basics, obviously, how an MP is elected, MPs represent seats, and so on and so on. And it was not an easy task because, obviously this was someone from a single party state, so trying to get her head around the issues, I think, took a bit of time. And this um, is a middle-aged woman, so she's of a generation has very much grown up with that system. Um, should there be a general election? Well, when was the last one? December 2019. That's under 3 years. I'm not sure. I think if Labour knows that they'll probably be elected right now, but Starmer doesn't have to do anything. The Tories are making such a mess of their own electability that Labour doesn't even have to do very much. That's a shocking thing. Because actually, the Labour Party, for people like myself, centrists, um, who are not swayed ideologically by the hard left or the hard right, when I look at the Labour Party, there are things that make me uneasy. I abhor the identity politics. I abhor the pandering to woke ideology. I made no secret of my My thoughts on wokeism. I think it's divisive. I think it's obnoxious. I think it's dishonest. Um, I don't think it's good for society. And Starmer has unquestionably pandered to it, as has his party. I don't like it. Crime. I was going to talk about regular crime. Starmer and Rayner, I've noticed, have been a bit more assertive on this. They've talked about victims of crime are let down and we need more police and so on. That's all good. And of course, Starmer was the director of public prosecutions. But I'm iffy with Labour on crime. Now, the Tories have failed. They haven't done anywhere near enough. A few little changes is not enough. Some of that stuff is welcome. More transparent trials. Victims having more of a say in parole hearings. Those things are good, but there's a lot more to do. I mean, really, I believe the entire legal establishment needs a shake up. I honestly do. 'Cause I think the level of public trust is almost non-existent at the moment in our legal establishment. I think that the Sentencing Council, the Parole Board, I think they're all tone deaf. I don't have much respect for them, and I don't think they understand public anger. Um, but what will Labour do on this? So, you know, the Tories are in a mess at the moment, but we have to also consider if there was a general election and Labour won, what are we getting? So I think Starmer's done some good things. He has acted very quickly on the anti-Semitism issues in his party. Fair play to him there. He has acted fast on that. Today, actually, there's a story that's developed today that Labour MP Christian Matheson has been, I was going to say suspended. He's actually resigned over allegations of sexual misconduct. The Labour has said they take a zero tolerance approach to this. I'm always a little bit wary of something like this. On the ground, allegations do not equate to guilt. He's denied them. The only thing is, he's also apologised. Now, if you're innocent, you don't apologise. He probably resigned because he thought it would be too difficult to stay in post whilst this goes on. If he is cleared, he should get his job back, and if he's found guilty, he should be charged. It's one of those two things. Um, but I am a little bit uneasy about the notion of someone being punished before they've even been found guilty of something. On the other hand, why apologize if he's innocent? I think a lot of this is yesterday marked 5 years since Me Too, and um, there is this tendency to believe all women. I think that's a completely ridiculous conclusion. Believe all women, because it automatically insinuates all women must be telling the truth and all men must be liars. That's a very dangerous sort of overview of the very idea of due process. But if he is guilty, it is an abuse of power, and there has been, numerous people in Parliament and in Labour ranks have called for his sacking. So maybe there is something to it. But like I say, something like this just needs to be dealt with in a sort of way. I think it's right that probably he doesn't have his job whilst the investigation is going on. But like I say, if he is cleared, he should get his job back and have his slate wiped clean because he's nothing to answer to. But why apologise? So I've mixed feelings on that one. Let me know your thoughts on that specific issue. Now, on the issue of an election, I suspect that Starmer and the Labour Party will want to be acting fast and say, "Oh, look, we're different." The Tories had these allegations, like the Chris Pincher scandal, and they were slow to react. We're different. We act quickly. Okay, and there's some merit in that, but I just think that when someone's accused of something, it has to be investigated. They have to be held to account if they're guilty. But I'm a little bit wary of someone being vilified. And it's all very well saying um, he's been accused of this, but sometimes the nature of reporting and the nature of the way people comment on these things treats it like the person is guilty. That doesn't sit well with me because there's two sides to every story, and we just don't know. We just don't know. Then again, I think it's very plausible that an MP can abuse their position. Happened before. It's very plausible. Probably there'd have to be things like character testimony. Does this man have a reputation for it? Does he have any previous offences? That sort of thing. Would all point to character analysis if because if it is word against words, then difficult situation. Um, but yeah, probably Labour done the only thing it could do, which was suspend him. Although I think he jumped the gun and resigned anyway. But this thing about a general election, well, firstly, the Tory leadership contest. Apparently nominations are going to close by Monday. As it stands, Rishi Sunak's on, if I've got this right, 55 MPs are backing him already. None of them have even declared formally, but Sunak has 55 backers, Johnson has 34, and Penny Mordaunt 16. I think realistically it's going to be between those three. Others like Kimmy Badenoch and Ben Wallace has ruled himself out, but Kimmy Badenoch, Suella Braverman, I don't think Braverman's going to get any support. I think she'll be seen as, having a blazing row with the Prime Minister and then resigning, and now, nah, I can't see her getting much support. So it's going to be between Sunak, Johnson, and Mordaunt. Mordaunt might be seen as a stabilising figure. I don't think she has many enemies. Sunak, the Johnson cultists see him as a traitor. I don't really see it that way. I think if you feel you can no longer work for someone who you see as corrupt, although Sunak hasn't used those words, then it's the right thing to do to resign. This blind loyalty is something that's not good for democracy. It's blind loyalty to an individual, and the Johnson cultists just don't get that. Boris Johnson. I accept that he has a base in the party. Is very enthusiastic, and he's very popular in that base. But he is a divisive figure, not just in the party, in the country. And if the Tories think bringing back a man who, I mean, Labour made this point, and it's hard to argue against. Starmer made this point. This was a man who lost the premiership because a significant portion of his party, of his MPs, did not believe they could serve him, did not believe that he was um, truthful, basically. So he loses the premiership, and now, less than 2 months later, uh, there's a chance they could install him back into that post. Now, that's what does that say about the Conservative Party? That they're prepared to put a man back in that they basically admit is a liar, that they basically admit is corrupt. And then, support come out and say, "Oh, but he's stabilizing. He's got charisma." And I'm afraid that argument frustrates me because I think that ethics in public life is not a small thing. Um, and I think Johnson is extremely corrupt. He done some good things as prime minister. His support for Ukraine is to be lauded. He got Brexit done. Now, whether that's good or not, it was something he promised, and he got it done. But that it was one scandal after another, and I think he flip flopped on China as well. So I don't trust Boris Johnson. Yes, he's a larger than life figure. Yes, he has a popular base, but I personally, my gut feeling is it should be probably Sunak or Morden. Um, Sunak himself is far from squeaky clean. I mean, Sunak also got a fine for COVID violations, but he was quite a strong chancellor. And I think some people in the country will remember the support he gave them during the pandemic. I think he was quite a good chancellor, actually, overall. Um, so people might remember that. I noticed some of the Indian networks are focusing on the chance that Sunak might once again have a chance to be prime minister. Some of them are spinning it like if he doesn't win, it's racism. That's a lot of nonsense. But um, I think at this point, I'd cautiously say Sunak's looking to be the next prime minister because he's leading the MPs' votes. They set it deliberately high, which is a good thing because it shows that they're taking it seriously. It's good that it's condensed. They're talking about the 28th. I think if one of these people get enough nominations by Monday, then we could have a new prime minister by Monday. And the way things are right now, we need stability. We really need stability. There is a question: who does Labour fear most? Now, on the question of a general election, Labour would argue that there's been three prime ministers this year, or there will be. Um, the Tories are in a mess. They don't trust themselves. How is this a good model for democracy? So let's have a general election. Of course, Labour is going to push that. Some have said, well, Starmer's using the playbook because actually it's good for him to have a divided, weak Tory government in place because every day that they're in power kind of strengthens his position. Starmer has been very strong in the dispatch box recently. I mean, I know it shouldn't be about quips, but it shows a level of confidence and it shows, he's got energy from somewhere that he didn't have at the beginning of his leadership. He was pretty dull. Well, that dull Starmer seems to be gone now. He's on fire basically. Um, the lady's not for showing up was one of his latest quips. But politics is a tough business. You need really, really tough skin to do this. Starmer was asked did he have any sympathy for Truss, and his response was, "This is not a drama. Real people's lives are involved," which was a little bit evasive. But um, I I have an inkling of sympathy because she knows that this is an awful record to have. The briefest premiership ever. I mean, from a human point of view, I have a mild amount of sympathy. But then again, that budget was pandering to the rich. She was warned against it. She didn't listen to people. She showed arrogance by only having people in her cabinet that were, loyalists. That was a mistake. I think she should have brought in some others that were, not loyalists or not people that would be just sort of saying yes. So that was a mistake. But the thing in this country is we don't directly elect the prime minister. Now, this is the thing the Tories keep falling back on. Oh, but the people elected the Tory party. Okay. But would those people who voted Tory in 2019, would they still feel that that democracy is being respected, because of everything that's happened? Maybe they feel the Tories are no longer democratic, that they are such a mess that this argument about, oh well, in our constitution we don't have a written constitution, but in our system, we don't directly elect the prime minister. The Tories keep falling back on this, but they must see that this looks really bad to the public. This looks like just chaos. Now, Labour, of course, Gordon Brown came to power without being elected by the people, so Labour can't say that they're totally distant from this themselves, but maybe it's time that changed. Maybe it is time in this country that we had a constitutional change so that a prime minister has to call an election if, for example, they have come to power without being elected by the wider public. They have it's mandated that they call a general election within, say, 6 months. I wouldn't want to see a situation where we're having general elections all the time. That's my only concern about a general election. I'm concerned that countries around the world, I mean, Russia predictably had a very smug, sarcastic response. Dmitry Medvedev was spouting out sarcasm on Twitter. Well, as was pointed out, at least Truss resigned. Under his FUG regime, opposition end up with a bullet in their head. So Dmitry Medvedev is in no position to be mocking the UK. Of course, that is the problem. These totalitarian states are going to be looking at, and even our allies are going to be concerned. They're going to think, are we, with all due respect to Rome, are we the new Italy? We have that sort of unstable politics where we're going to change government every year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is an exceptional situation. Um, but really, if we have a situation where, let's say, Sunak comes in, then the Johnson loyalists stage a coup against him, it's just going to be, do these people not see how this is looking to the wider public? Can they not swallow their pride and think beyond party politics? Um, this is one of the biggest problems with the Tories right now. Um, they are so kind of obsessed by these internal loyalties and schisms and allegiances that they're losing sight of how this is going down with the wider public. And I don't agree with those Tories who say that the public will punish the Tories for getting rid of Boris. Boris was one of the big liabilities in the first place, in my opinion. They can't keep going back to 2019 and saying, oh, well, they got these red wall seats. That was before Partygate. That was before a lot of the scandals emerged. Um, I mean, that election was only a few months into his premiership. Hell, I give him credit for calling the election a few months into his premiership, and he won it fairly and securely. But There's a few things. Firstly, there was a terrible Labour leader at the time, a hard left leader who was anti-West. That's something Starmer is not. Um, but yeah, one of my main concerns is how this is being projected to the world. Firstly, our enemies are going to be loving this. Um, regimes like Russia and China are going to be looking at this and lapping it up and saying, and when my Chinese student asked me about this yesterday, I wasn't going to avoid the topic. I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to show freedom of the press. So I actually showed her some newspapers. And, the chance of a Chinese state newspaper questioning Xi Jinping is utterly unthinkable. So I hope I done my democratic duty by showing her the freedom of the press. But she may interpret it as, oh, the British think their own leader is weak, and it's like, because in communist states and in totalitarian states, people like strong leaders, like in the sense of, I mean, of course, a strong leader is important everywhere, but in the sense of strong for the sake of being strong, not strong for the sake of what's right and what's good for the country. With totalitarian states, it's all about machismo and yeah, literally. So I don't know. This situation is I knew Trust would have a short premiership. I didn't think it would be this short. I thought maybe okay, she'll be given some sort of deadline. It would be another few weeks, but it's just. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are now making comparisons. Like David Blaine was in his box for 44 days. Um, there's, you could keep certain food in a fridge. I think the lettuce one's an exaggeration. I think the lettuce will go off before that, but you could probably keep certain food products in a fridge for longer. I mean, this is not good. I do think we need stability. I don't agree that Boris Johnson is the man to bring it. I think most likely, because he was runner-up, I think Rishi Sunak is the obvious answer. I don't think any Tory is totally squeaky clean when it comes to ethics, but or not many at least. Sunak isn't. He was fined for COVID violations, and then there was a whole thing about his wife. That's corrupt. So it's like honestly, it's sort of choosing who is the least corrupt. Um, Starmer seems to be squeaky clean individually, but he seemed to be cleared over the Beergate thing. But some of his politics, some of his positions, I'm really not sure about. So I don't know. It's a perplexing time in British politics. It really is.